Now it's visible. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to DenverScript. How awesome is it? This commemorates our 4th year. And people still show up. It's great. Who's the first timer? Who comes here every time? I try. Awesome. All right, these things are not possible without sponsors, so I want to thank Co-Talent, who's sponsoring our beer and the venue. That's where you're at right now. So if you're in the job market, definitely give them a call. I have some of their business cards up here for Maury. She's awesome. Definitely give her a ring if you're in the job market. Go Spot Check. It's actually a place that I work for. They're sponsoring the food for tonight. Nice. Does anyone know what Go Spot Check is? We're gonna have to work on that. It's an app for allowing people to go out into the field with like live surveys to get real-time data from, like, you know, if you're Jim Beam, you're needing people to make sure you're represented correctly, make sure you're on the top shelf, the label's facing out. So that's what we do. Monitor. Epic Brewing gives us a discount on our beer. Denver Pizza Company also being very nice to us and give us a discount on pizza. Front-end Masters. We will be giving away three month-ish, which is like a $100 value for 3 months for free. So we will be giving out 3 of those tonight. As a matter of fact, Sarah is actually one of the speakers tonight, and she teaches on Front-end Masters. Oh, shit, I spoiled it.
Oh, in case anybody didn't know, DenverScript turned 4 today.
But we thought it'd be fun to just think about, 4 years ago. It's not that long, really. But to think about in the tech world, this is about to get weird. Or more depressing. I'm not sure which one it is. 4 years ago, ES 2015 spec was being finalized. React was announced and open sourced. And then a few months after, React Native was also announced. GraphQL and Redux were released. Babel became a thing. Actually, I looked back, they were around since 2012. Damn it. But nobody knew really who they were until about that time. WebAssembly starts to enter in the scene. Node.js and IO.js formed like Voltron. Like Voltron?
Yeah, they came together.
They did. If no one knows that story, Node.js did not really keep up with the times, and IO.js was screw this, and branched off and made things better. And Node was like, all right, come back. We'll merge you. And then, very depressingly, Leonard Nimoy, Spock, had passed. Sorry, I put on.
I think that was the last one.
Yeah, I kept that one as the last one. I was like, I can't. We have to end on that hour now. Does anybody else remember anything else from 4 years ago in terms of JavaScript or anything like that? Anyone?
Or do you remember something you even did 4 years ago?
I released jQuery CSV in 2011.
Say that one more time.
I released jQuery CSV in 2011.
That's more than 4 years ago.
Hey, if we would turn 8, that'd be relevant. We could have nailed it.
It'd be here in 4 years. 4 more. Right?
It's not how that works.
Isn't that how it works? 8 years.
But it is really cool you released that, though.
Anyone else? All right, fine, we'll move on. So, what's going on in JS land? Great question.
What you do?
Well, this isn't my laptop.
Why are you messing with my stuff?
Because I'm trying to pull out the doc.
I love that's your background.
I don't know what button you hit.
Tom Hapfoot.
God damn it. But honestly, sometimes you gotta fall in love, right? And work a lot.
I am so changing my background tonight.
I'll send it to you.
And back from his long vacation away in Uruguay.
It wasn't a vacation, I was working. I highly recommend fully distributed remote jobs. I was working for 5 weeks in Uruguay. That was awesome. So do you want to talk about the first few? You're the one that put them on there. The Chrome 72.
I copy and pasted. This is your domain.
Oh, very good. So normally what we do is we go. I get excited about the new features in DevTools. Matt added some stuff about the actual Chrome highlights themselves. So those are there for you. I'll skip to what I'm excited about in JavaScript land, which is the DevTools stuff that was added. So the highlights video, as always, is there. For performance metrics, this is kind of cool. It now includes timing info. So things that you normally look at is first content, full paint, when the DOM's fully loaded, that kind of stuff. There's nice little milestone tags that show up on the scrolling timeline. So that's pretty neat. They've been doing a lot of work with matching up both the representation on the page, the DOM, and the console. So in continuing that vein, now if you hover over a DOM node, it'll highlight. You don't have to click it or inspect or anything. If you just hover over anything in the DOM, it'll highlight the relevant node on the page. So that's pretty neat. Let's keep scrolling down a little. Okay, this one's really cool. You can now you can copy and paste a valid JavaScript document query selector for a node on the page just by right-clicking it, which is super, super cool. So if you click on that GIF there.
Sorry, indentation was wrong.
It's okay. Oh, I blew right past it. There it is. So check this out. So what we're gonna do here is there's a little maximize button on it too once it loads. There's a full screen button, right? That one. Okay. Well, it's gonna spoil the surprise here, but I'll talk through it again once it restarts. It's on like 15 seconds long. Okay, cool. So here's what we're gonna do. It's really blurry, but here's what's going on. So right here, we right-clicked on the paragraph tag of that, and then we clicked copy as JavaScript. And right now, what it is, it's going to do a document query selector, a valid JavaScript expression for that element. So when we pasted it here, this actually says JavaScript query selector, and it gives you something you can paste directly into your code for testing or whatever else to identify that specific element in the DOM. And so the way that they validate it, again, they've been doing a lot of work with auto highlighting and things, is that as soon as it's pasted, that is a different feature from like Chrome 70 or 71 that when you type in a valid reference to something on the DOM, it'll highlight that DOM element for you in your live representation on the page. So I thought that was pretty cool. A lot of times you're kind of like thinking about, well, do I find this thing by ID or class, or how am I going to do that? You can just right-click on it, and then it'll give you already a snippet of code you can drop in and use. So that's pretty neat. And then audits panel, they also keep updating all the time, has a new audit. When it runs, it'll tell you which JavaScript libraries that you have on your page that are being detected. Yeah, so that's the new stuff with Chrome 72. So for those of you that don't know me, if any were here last month, I was the one who was typing in real time from Uruguay on this Google Doc. And to clarify, I think one of the confusions from last time, Chrome 69 was skipped. They just blew right past it and did a bunch of bug fixes, and then went straight to 70 and 71.
I thought we did discuss that.
You said your exact words were, did we just not talk about it because it wasn't interesting, or did they not release it? And the answer is they didn't release it.
Somebody's memory is better than mine.
And then I guess my guess, so pipeline operator is still in stage 1?
Yeah.
Just keeping us posted.
You know,
Is this just gonna be your every month to let us know it hasn't moved out of stage 1?
It's also a way to every month
we can just keep this.
Mike reminds us of the lightning talk that he gave. Cool. So what are you guys excited about? Well, I guess adding to the top list, any things that have come out that you guys are excited about? Any news that you've heard about JavaScript? Anything else? Yeah, what's up?
Not news, but just on that same vein of the copy and paste. I don't know if this is new or older. I just discovered a couple days ago that you can go to the network tab and copy its fetch, and you can make like a post or put right to the DevTools console.
Oh, cool.
Instead of open post manager, anything like that.
Awesome.
So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
You can update
Well,
everything in there.
and along those lines, right, we've kind of added this stuff to kind of like broaden the conversation a little bit. So even if it's not new, right, sort of like was it like CBS reruns, right? If it's not new, if you haven't seen it, it's new to you. Any stuff that you've discovered recently that you're excited about? Any kind of like, or any exciting sort of big blockers that you fixed that you were excited about, and some new thing you were able to figure out? Any high five moments you guys were really excited about this month? It was kind of like, yes, I finally did that. Yeah.
I implemented my first web component.
Nice.
Vanilla web component, no Polymer, no lit HTML, just like
Very cool.
standard.
Congratulations. And actually, I forgot to mention, apologies, I am quite sick and really feeling out of it. I just didn't want to miss 2 months in a row, so I specifically came for this, and I'm probably leaving right after this. But for the front-end masters thing, as our first person to volunteer something, you get a free front-end masters trial membership for 3 months. So congratulations. Yeah. So as Matt mentioned, front-end masters is a really great site where you can see Sarah and other people give some both introductory and really deep dives on all different kinds of technologies. It's a monthly membership. The code that we'll send you is for 3 months free, and each month is about $30-something. It's about $100 value. So congratulations. Hint, if you submit more stuff, then we'll do a random raffle at the end for the other 2. So if you guys have any other things you want to talk about.
Who's excited now?
What about any new technologies, frameworks, libraries you came across? Again, they don't have to be new to the industry. It could be something you came across and you're excited about and helped you solve a problem.
I got one.
Yes, Matt.
Something I just finished today. I was actually really excited about it. So we've been working with our design team, and they have like 250 icons that they came up with. And I was like, sweet. Shit. We're going to use these SVGs, and we're also going to make them in React components, and doing a whole bunch of copy and pasting was terrible. So I actually made a something that actually takes all the SVGs. It will now make them automatically just generate them into React components. It's distributed and versioned, and that was fun. The code's probably terrible, but it was fun.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you have 250 icons?
Design system.
Okay.
Yes.
React hooks.
What's that?
React hooks.
What about them?
They're new this month. Like they just like officially.
Is it officially out now?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Weekend.
Pro tip, next month, there will be someone talking about React hooks.
You don't know, off the top of your head, you don't know the version of React that came with that, do you?
16.8.1.
Right, yeah. No,
something like that.
No. The reason that's exactly what it was, right? Because 16.7, literally they released it and said, this is not the one with React hooks. That was like the subtitle they wrote on it. That's what I should remember. Yeah.
Related note to our hooks for UJS as well.
Sweet.
Yeah, I wrote an article.
Oh, about Vue.js hooks? Oh, very cool. Tag team in the back about Vue.js also has hooks that have come out, and Sarah wrote an article about it. Sweet. Oh man, now they're flying up. Yes.
So browsers are looking to get better import specifiers for JavaScript libraries. You can import the library from the package name rather than direct path. And they're also looking at doing CDN fallbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try loading from a CDN before it tries loading from a local copy, which means if you already have it cached, then it can go directly from cache.
Oh, cool.
I didn't hear what.
Browsers are
Fair import specifiers.
the what?
Fair import specifiers in the browser.
Import specifiers. Very good. Chris.
Yeah, I've just been playing around a lot or building stuff with Apollo and GraphQL.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just been having a lot of fun with how easy it is to mock data without an API with those, and how kind of comprehensive their testing suite is as well. So definitely check that stuff out if you want to have fun mocking data and testing with GraphQL.
And do you have any specific resources you recommend on how to get started on some of that mock testing with Apollo and GraphQL?
How about making it a talk?
You should totally make it a talk.
Oh wow, look at that session. Right there.
Cool.
But yeah, I did Wes Boss's intro to GraphQL course.
Sweet. Anyone else? Anything that you came across this month that you're excited about? Yeah.
I am on a project where I'm using Next.js.
Mhm.
It's the first time I've used it.
Mhm.
It's really cool.
What's your favorite thing about it?
Well, I like that it automatically code splits for you,
Mhm.
or at least like sets up an environment that makes it easier to do that. Because I've also been on projects where later on you have to go back and code split yourself. So having that from the get-go is kind of nice.
Awesome. Super cool.
So just same thing.
I heard all the code splitting. Which
Next.js.
one? Oh, yeah.
Next.js is super cool, and everyone should check it out. Sweet. Anyone else? Yeah, in the very back.
So this week I was playing around with Victory.
Victory?
Yeah, which is a graphic library by Formidable Labs, and we were kind of looking at different options, and I would really recommend you use Infinite Graph for anything that you're doing. It's a very customizable React-based component library for graphic. So you can use pie charts or line graphs,
sweet.
bar charts. It's very cool.
So is it? So it's like a data visualization, kind of like what D3 used to sort
It's
of.
based on D3,
Okay.
but it's D3, but you get to use it using, you get to kind of control it using prompts like you would in.
Oh, super cool.
Good documentation.
Yeah. Good. So we got a +1 on it too. Fantastic. Anything else? Yeah.
D's.
Serverless?
Serverless.
Serverless, yeah, we're starting to write a new app, yeah. I've been going through the serverless stack. It's incredible.
What's your favorite thing about it?
Totally different.
What's your favorite thing about it?
It's hard to say for super early, but I like the difference in the architecture of kind of writing microservices and breaking everything down in little pieces. It's easy to wrap your head around.
Awesome. Serverless.
Sorry, I was trying to spell.
Serverless. Server and then less. There you go. Cool. We got one more. Oh, come on.
That's actually more than we usually get.
It is. Yes.
There's a framework called Quasar. It's nearing version 1.
Quasar is nearing version 1.
It's based on Vue.
It's based on Vue.
Yeah.
What's the elevator pitch for it? Like, what does it do?
Server-side rendering.
Okay, sweet. Vue server-side rendering. Awesome.
Yeah, cross-platform.
Yeah, this is great, guys. Thank you. As Matt mentioned, this is probably our most involved what's going on in JS that we've had in a very long time, maybe ever. So that's great. For all the stuff that we talked about, for anything that might have a relevant article or link or whatever, Matt usually does a really good job of, all the stuff on the top and the links to the highlights of DevTools and stuff, we'll post all of this as a comment on the meetup page. And then Matt usually does a very good job of also putting any links, relevant links you can find to the stuff that you guys submitted here on the side. But the cool thing is, if you think about all this other stuff that we've just been talking about, aside from all the talks and everything we're about to go through, there's a lot of really cool stuff that people in the audience, not even presenters, are playing around with. So if you're sitting in the audience and somebody next to you mentions something that you thought was kind of cool, we usually end relatively early, and then the pizza and beer is still around. So chat with each other and see if you can exchange some ideas on that. So cool. With that, I'm probably gonna go home and go to sleep immediately. But yeah, thanks a lot.
So one more thing. DenverScript is now an open collective.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
We copied React Denver. What does that mean? That means we are now able to take donations as a nonprofit. So donations help us cover costs that the sponsors don't help with, like a couple $100 a year it costs just to have a meetup account, or stickers, or it allows the more money that we get for the organization, the more we can actually do for you guys, something more fun, maybe a taco bar instead of pizza or something. Who knows? But it's I'll post out a link later to it, but it's just opencollective.com/DenverScript. And if you come here, find this useful, like you want to chip in a few bucks or a lot of bucks, that'd be great.
We'll throw your name up on a slide and find a very embarrassing picture.
Nice.
It's usually how it goes.
If you donate more, we won't put an embarrassing picture. We'll only put your name.
Awesome. So this worked out really well last time by total chance. So we always do job announcements, but if you have a job to announce, please come up to the front to announce it. So if you have a job announcement, please come up front. Not all at once. While people make it up here, Go Spot Check is always looking for people. In fact, we are still looking for 2 front-end engineers, full stack engineer, a lead engineer, a QA engineer, and probably like 50 other engineers. But go spot check. Talk to me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Abreu. I work at Twilio SendGrid. We were recently acquired. If you hadn't heard, we used to be SendGrid. Now we're Twilio SendGrid. We send email. Twilio sends SMS. And I am on the front-end team building our marketing platform. We are hiring across a bunch of different teams across kind of all different skill levels. So if you're interested, please check us out. You can go to sendgrid.com, careers, to find out more. Love to see you guys there.
I don't need the microphone. Fine. Hi, I'm Mike. I help run this thing a little bit.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So I work at Quizlet. We right now have a lot of open positions. We have a spot in Denver for a full stack engineer. So if you're interested in helping make education a little bit better, come talk to me or talk to Brent in the back. He's got a gray hat on. But yeah, we've also got other open positions. So if you know designers, data scientists, product managers, blah, 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 look us up, Quizlet.com. Talk to me after this.
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Amy. I am representing a company called Brightwheel. I'm the head of engineering there. We are building edtech software for early education centers, so daycares, preschools. If any of you are parents, you might be using our product. We are hiring across the board, front-end engineers, data engineers, QA, product managers. Please come see me if you're interested. If the name Brightwheel seems familiar to you, that's because we were on Shark Tank at one point a couple of years ago. So if you want to learn more about the product, check out Brightwheel Shark Tank. There's a clip on YouTube. And then lastly, if anyone is interested, we are doing just like a meet and greet, open house type of thing. We are in the WeWork offices next to Union Station. So just let me know if you're interested. I can send you a link for the invite and information. We're going from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. tomorrow. Okay.
Which floor?
Third floor.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Any other jobs to announce? Sweet. Let's get on with our first talk of the night. That's Brent.
Yeah.
Hi, Brent. Just forget the talk. Talking stories.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is going to be pretty short and sweet, and some of it is going to be really more specific to React and Redux, so I apologize if that's not something that you are interested in or work with, but part of it is about mocking fetch calls and tests as well, so that should be more relevant to maybe more people. So just a quick little thing about me real quick. Full stack developer, JavaScript centered stack. I work for a Radial Development Group up in Loveland, and I also do some freelance work for clients building React apps. I was a former musician, and well, I'm still a musician, but I was something I did regularly more in the past. And I played drums on cruise ships for about 10 years, and I also did some tours with the Glenville Orchestra. They're in Boulder, by the way, if you're into that kind of a thing, and you want to check it out this week. There's an obligatory, moving on. Okay, so mocking HTTP fetch requests. So why would you want to do this? Well, some of the main reasons is that you lower the amount of resources required, and it speeds up your tests, so you're not sitting around waiting more than you have to, more than is necessary. Also, the primary tool that I'm using is Jest. It's a testing framework by Facebook, and I like it because it comes in with a built-in assertion library and also mock stubs and spies. You kind of get everything you get the kitchen sink. all in there. With Mocha, you might have to use expect or sign on or some other things, but this gives you kind of a lot of stuff that you'll use just in one go. Okay, so this is the goal, is to test an async Redux action generator without making the actual fetch call, and then make sure that the action that you're dispatching is what you expect. So I use thunks, and so that's sort of what's going on with this action generator, and this is an action generator from a chat app I'm developing for React Native. So it just gets messages for a conversation based on the ID. It makes a fetch call to the backend to grab those messages from MongoDB, and then it gets the response and it dispatches those messages to store. So the first thing to do is you want to create a fixture in your test file, or sorry, not your test file, it doesn't have to be, you can import it, but it's a fixture that sort of is just kind of based on what you would expect to get from that backend API call. So these are just a couple messages in an array with some of the properties I'd expect. And then you want to import that fixture into your test file, as well as the action, the async Redux action that you're going to be testing. Okay, and then if you are, now I use fetch, if you use Axios or some other things, you can use Moxios, and there's some other tools you can use to do this, but I'm just doing it because I'm using fetch in this particular instance. So you want to create a response, and when you use fetch, you get a response that has an OK property, and then you can call a JSON method on it to parse it. And so I can create my mock response with the OK property. It's going to be true because it's going to return the response OK. And the JSON function is going to return what I expect, which is a success with a true Boolean, and then the data property holds the messages. So that will take care of that. And then you want to, this is how you mock fetch then. You can use just mocks, and so you can use window.fetch and then set that to just.fn. And what this does is it will sort of overwrite the default behavior of fetch, and it'll just return a function that you can define here. And so it's just a promise that resolves with my mock response. And so that will be called instead of regular fetch, or if it's looking for fetch and it can't find it, it'll just use this mock that you set up that way. Okay, now mocking the Redux store, you can use an npm package called Redux mock store. And this comes with built-in, it comes with the API that would normally be on your store for Redux, so you can dispatch actions and then test those actions if they're what you expect. So you want to install a dependency first, that's easy enough, and then you import a library helper method, configure mock store, you import your middleware, in this case it's Thunk, and then you import the action. Well, I may have already done that, but just in case, you can do that as well. And then you want to create a const, which you call that helper method, configure mock store. You pass in that middleware, Thunk, and then you store that in a const. And this is what you can call to create that mock store. And you set that to, say, a store const. And then you can use, say, store.dispatch, and it will mock all of these things for you. And so now you can this is how you would use it. You just dispatch your action, and then you can call get actions, which comes with that library method that comes with that Redux mock store. That will return an array of actions that were dispatched, and then you can grab those actions and you can make assertions about them. So I expect this action that was dispatched to equal this particular shape. Okay, so this is the complete example. This is sort of the final product. You have load messages for conversation, a test for that action. So I create the mock store and assign it to the const store, and then I create the mock response with the OK and the JSON property. I define the behavior of fetch that will be used when it's called by that imported action by setting it to just mock, returns a promise that resolves with that mock response I created. And then I'm going to use the Redux mock store, which is going to simulate dispatching that action containing the response from the fetch call. That is going to, I just have a dummy ID that I'm passing into the imported action, and then it's going to let's see here, expected action. Okay, right, so this is my expected action. That's what I expect it to be. And so I'm going to make sure that the action that was dispatched is that action. So I'm going to call store.getActions, which is from that library. And then I'm going to expect the length to be 1, so 1 action was dispatched. And then I'm going to expect, it's an array, so I have to access the first action in the array to equal my expected action. So that's pretty much the gist of it. It circumvents the need to make an actual API call, so you reduce your resources. It's quicker to do, and then the Redux mock store will help you with testing your dispatched actions. These are just some quick alternative resources. Redux actions assertions. That's sort of if you want to get more involved with your tests, combining tests for actions and reducers. Axios I mentioned before, if you use Axios, you can use that to mock the request. Knock will intercept HTTP requests and allow you to send mock responses as well. And Supertest, you can simulate backend calls with that as well. So that pretty much wraps it up. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Sarah speak, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll do the best I can here. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. In your code example, you're obviously kind of doing the mocking of the fetch, kind of just by using the suggest function wrapper. And you're using for the store, you're using like an NPM package. Is there a reason why you're doing that and not using for example, I know there's a just fetch mock NPM package, which allows you to basically define what you want to have that fetch actually do, like not 16 or things like that. The other question would be, I don't see actually the test for the mock response. I only see that the action is expected to be something.
Okay, well, to answer your first question, I guess the reason I didn't use a library for that was because I guess it's just one less dependency to install. It just keeps things lighter. And this works, for my purposes, this works perfectly fine. So I just stick with that. But I have seen that package, and I'd be sure it's very useful.
Maybe I think it's interesting, or maybe I thought it would be making things easier because you can actually say, I want this fetch to fail in the text. And my angle has been recently mostly like code coverage, and those people who are religious and speak into code coverage want you to cover the catch of the error case. And I guess in your case, you would have to resolve, you have to have your promise rejected. Right?
Yes. I don't know if you could do something more similar to what you're suggesting, maybe with maybe using rejecting the promise, maybe, and adding some kind of test involved around that. But this was just sort of a quick basic example of sort of the general way to mock things. Yes.
Will these slides be available later on?
Sure, I can make them available. Yeah, no problem. I can put them all up on Meetup. And, yep. Sure. Anything else, or am I getting the hook? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
Hey, Brent, you have a few minutes, hit the restroom, get refill, get some more pizza,
Or grab some stickers.
Yeah, we bought a couple 100 stickers, so.
There are some that
Yeah, we just need.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what we. Yeah.
Oh my god. It's not the worst idea. All the people. I can help
End of the desk.
This is oh, you must
Yeah, you speak enough, I totally understand. That looks sturdy. I would explain why it's so heavy. That was not expected. That's right before we started, we did Alright. Good day, Richard. The last speaker tonight, Sarah Grosner. Sorry, funny, it was really hard.
There's also plenty of seats up in the front. Good luck finding them.
There's like a whole row of empty seats in the front, but I think people just like are not sure if I did or something yet today. I did, I swear I did. Sometimes it's a little dodgy, but today, we're good. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's so much fun. All of the amazing pizza, and I actually didn't even realize Front-End Masters was doing a giveaway here. That's so cool. Okay, so I'm gonna ask something of you, and we're gonna do a little bit of a test in the beginning. And what we're gonna do, now I'm actually also gonna test your ability to follow instructions. I'm gonna show you two pieces of code, A and B, and you're gonna raise your hand for the code that you think is cleanest. And don't yell it out or anything, just raise your hand. I'll give you a minute to look at it. Okay, so which code is the cleanest? Check it out for a minute. Okay. Everyone for A, raise your hand. Okay. Everyone for B, raise your hands. All right, we got like 25%, 75%, cool. All right, which code is clean? Check it out for a minute. All right. Everyone for A, raise your hands. And everyone for B, raise your hand. Wow, like 50-50, cool, cool. All right, this time you can yell things out. What does this do?
No idea.
Browser sniffing.
First of all,
That's some type of check.
Undefined.
Does definitely does some kind of
Yes. Right.
Okay, so the answer actually is it looks for whether or not you're using a device, a mobile device. Okay, so how many of you have heard this before? If you don't need comments if you write clean code. Yeah?
Yeah.
Fair amount, right? So this is where I think a lot of misconceptions about comments lie. So the book Clean Code by Robert C. Martin talks about this, and this is kind of like the, end all be all of the entire book is this concept that you don't need comments if you're writing clean code. That if you're writing comments, you should rewrite your code because your code should be self-documenting. I both agree with this and disagree. In the process of writing a comment, you can often find things that can be written better, but it's not an either or. So I might still be able to rewrite that code better, but actually sometimes I do need comments. So I think that the big thing here, and the reason why we do sometimes need comments, is that code can describe how, but it cannot describe why. And I'm not the first person to say this. This is a bunch of people that have made this rebuttal for this as well. We're going to kind of explore that a little bit today. So all that said, I find people are often thinking about writing comments or not writing comments, and they think of this as kind of like a Boolean value. I don't think that there's one right or correct reason to leave a comment or to not leave a comment. They can sometimes make our code bases more legible, and they can sometimes mislead us. They can guide us and sometimes they're a crutch. But for that reason, for the reason that sometimes they're appropriate and sometimes they're not, today we're going to be talking about the art of comments. My name is Sarah Drasner, known on Twitter as Sarah Edo. I work for Microsoft. Yeah. I'm also on the Vue core team, and I work for CSS Tricks, and I do I'm a master's person. Cool. Okay. So I mentioned before that there's good and bad comments, right? So let's explore some of the good and the bad, and we'll go through the good first, because that's kind of a nice place to start. So what is the why? Many examples of good comments can be housed under this category. Code explains what you'd like the computer to do. So you'll hear people talk about declarative code because it describes the logic without writing things out like steps to a recipe. I kind of think that code comments can be the same way. So if you have something like this, we had to write this function because the browser interprets everything as a box. This doesn't describe what the code below it will do. It doesn't describe the actions it will take. If you found a more elegant way of writing this, you could rewrite it later and actually not have to maintain that comment. So because of this, less maintenance is required, and we're going to dig into that a little bit further on today. If you found a better way to write this, you wouldn't have to rewrite the comment. You could quickly understand what everything beneath it is doing, but not have to dig into the particularities. The funniest version of this I've ever seen is by Sophie Alpert. She is the former manager of the React team, and they had this particularly nasty bug in the React code base where this weird tooltip was popping up all the time, and it took her a long time to find it. It took everyone on the team a really long time to find it. So she wrote this like gigantic, this is longer than most of my readmes on my GitHub repos. I don't even know if you can see it. There's like the line of code is like hanging out down there. But it took them so long to find this answer, and it was not that intuitive. So this whole code block is explaining the how and not, or the why and not the how. Not that you should do this every time, but I thought this was the funniest example of it. Another really good one is clarifying what's not legible to humans, just like that huge block of code that we saw earlier. Who knows what this does? Does anyone know what this does? Yeah, that's crazy. What about this one? That's some CSS right there. Yeah. This one targets Firefox versions 2 and 3, and this one targets Chrome above or equal to 28, Safari above and equal to 7, and below Opera below 14. I've written code that needed something like this. I was a manager of engineering over at Zillow, and I needed to target browsers and devices really specifically before. So in order to keep another maintainer from thinking that you've taken mushrooms on your way to work, it's great to comment that and let people know what you're doing, lest they think you're insane. Especially in preparation for a time when browsers change and you don't have to support it anymore, and you can rip that sucker out. Oh, who's smart? We are. Who writes clean code? We do. We don't have to look, we don't have to comment. Look at how clear that is. Well, okay, there's a problem with that statement. I don't know if you saw that, but that first exercise we did, 50-50, man. Like some of the code looked cleaner to some of you than others. That's very subjective, what clean code is. And actually, like 4 years ago, me was writing code that I thought was really clean, and now I look back on it going like, yeah. So that even changes through your career too, right? Like what you think is clean evolves. So that is not kind of like the best indicator of not having to write clean code. But we're going to revisit this a little bit later on and kind of delve into this a little bit more. Another problem with this way of thinking about things is that we all have specialties in different areas. So if we're in a team that looks like this, it's like maybe a smaller team where everybody's skill set is pretty well aligned. You might not need to write a lot of comments because everybody's skill set is just like yours and you all kind of know the backgrounds. Like you've all been working with React for the same amount of time, so you don't have React.create class components and stuff hanging out all over the place like some code bases. I'm just kidding, we all have those. And so on small teams where people's skill sets are a little bit tightly coupled, you might not need that. But if we have a Venn diagram where people's skill sets are further apart. And actually, it looks like I'm dogging on the smaller Venn diagram, but this covers way more ground, right? Like you're covering way more skill area by having people spread out a little bit more. But in that case, maybe not everybody knows the same things that you do, and things aren't as clear as they would be to you if you were reading it. So maybe you have junior devs or interns really frequently, and sometimes they don't see things or know things the way that you do, and some clarifying comments could really help them. Another thing is, I didn't put actually all the code on here because it wouldn't fit in a slide, but comments can also be like the chapters of a book. So if you're thinking about a book, it's the same amount of information and it says the same things whether or not it has chapters or paragraphs or any of those things, right? But we format it to have those things because sometimes we want to find things quickly. And sometimes we want to be able to scan things in a really legible way. Sometimes if you have a larger block of code, then that is really nice to be able to have those visual separations. And you might say, well, Sarah, we have imports and modules and functional programming now, and we can split everything up. Sure, absolutely, and thank God for that. But I would say that there is always a time when some piece of code is necessarily longer. And in those cases, it's somewhat easier for people to scan if you break it up a little bit. This one's a really weird one. A guide to keep the logic straight while writing the code, because this actually falls into the good and bad category. So I would say that this is really good when you're writing the code. So sometimes if I have a lot of logic and a lot of stuff that I'm trying to accomplish, I'll do something like this, where I'm like, all right, I need to get the request from the server, I need to get an error if it failed, I need to do X thing with your request, I need to format the data like so, and then I kind of fill in the gaps there, right? That's good, that helps keep me on track, it helps me break things down into smaller pieces. But what ends up happening is if you leave those pieces of code in your code base, they're not very clarifying, right? They're just doubling up what you did beneath it. That's kind of when I'm writing out exactly what the thing does right beneath it, and then I'm forcing you to read it twice. And it's maybe not the best comment I could have written. So, this can be really valuable to write, but maybe not to read. So my perfect world suggestion is that you use these comments at the time of writing, and then you revisit them after you're done. And as you delete them, you can kind of ask yourself, is this the most elegant and legible way that I could express this? Is there another comment that I could replace this with that kind of explains things a little bit more clearly, or do I not need a comment at all? So it's about, revisiting it, thinking like, what does a future me from another mother think about this block of code here? What would I need to understand? This one's really funny. Okay, this is okay to refactor. This isn't my best work. Don't shoot me. So have you ever had like an aggressive, who here has had a really aggressive product deadline? Yeah, like most of us, right? Has anybody ever had a situation where you had like an A/B test that maybe it was even a feature that you didn't agree with, and they were like, no, it's just in for the A/B test, and we'll get rid of it later. And then the code lived on, the queue for forever. And so these kind of comments are actually really helpful as a maintainer, because if I come across something like that, and I see, something that's like written really terribly and obviously in a hurry, or maybe not obviously in a hurry, I spend less time trying to imagine sabotaging the person's morning commute and, like hating them with all of my fiery vengeance and moving on with my life and saying, all right, instead of trying to figure out what's going on here or what was going on with this person, I'm going to actually look at this from the point of refactoring it. Right? I'm not going to try to preserve what's here. I'm going to try to figure out how I can remove what's here. So that's really helpful. This could also fall into the bad comment section, because if you do this too much, then you're relying on the comment to kind of be a crutch and not write good code. So be wary of using this too often, but I do think that these kind of comments can be really helpful to communicate to someone, this isn't my best work, we just have to get it in. And that's totally cool. That happens to all of us. How about commenting as a teaching tool? So what if you're a node shop that's given like a Ruby project? Maybe it's totally normal Ruby, but like your team is totally in over its head. and you're not really sure what to do. Maybe you're a professor or you're a teacher, and I give courses all the time. Comments are really helpful in these examples. These are limited examples where writing the how is actually really helpful because the person is literally learning on the spot. And so they might not just be able to infer what that means or what it's doing because they've never seen it before in their lives. So, comment that shit. Learning is humbling enough without them having to ask you out loud what they could quicker learn just by reading. I Stack Overflowed the bejesus out of this. Okay, did you copy, paste an entire block of code from Stack Overflow? This isn't a great practice, but we've all been there, okay? So something that I've done that saved me in the past was to put the link to the post inside the code where I'm working. And I've had people express to me like, but then I don't get credit. That's optimizing for the wrong thing, I think, because inevitably people have different coding styles, and the author might have a different style from you. And if you look at it later, you might be like, that's weird, why did I do X? And you also get smarter later, right? You learn new things, you grow as a developer. You might look at the piece of code and go, I'm actually good enough to write this myself now. Later on. Another thing that happens is you can refer back to the Stack Overflow post, and sometimes people come up with better answers and have more to say on that subject. Sometimes APIs change, so that can be a really great thing too. So this has been a really good saver for me on a lot of occasions. Comments can be helpful, and so this is why I include the Stack Overflow link in my comments sometimes. The job of comments is to be helpful to yourself later or the person who comes after you. April Wenzel makes this point in this article called It's Time to Retire RTFM. If you don't know what RTFM means, that's read the fucking manual. It's a really good article. I've been guilty of this myself. In tech, sometimes we're comfortable with this kind of survivorship bias where we're like, I had to do it, so you have to too. Like, I had to learn this, you have to learn it the hard way also. I don't think that that's your job as a developer. Your job as a developer is to help other developers understand your code and yourself understand your code so that you can be as productive as possible. You've heard the term probably 10x engineer. Think that you're actually a 10x engineer if you enable 10 other people to be good engineers. That's like the real 10x engineer. So looking over your comments as a tool for other people's success rather than a way to not have something so that you can show off or something like that. Not that that's the only reason to do stuff, but thinking about it more as a way of communicating to somebody else and what's helpful is a really good start for writing them. Okay, so that's a good way to segue in, because that's the heavy. We're going to segue into the bad, because sometimes bad comments do exist, and we should talk about those, huh? So let's avoid writing them. They just say what they're already doing. You're like, what? Come on, man. Sometimes it's really frustrating to read comments like this because you're like, yeah, now I just had to read it twice. So that can feel really irritating if it's a code base where you have kind of normal stuff going on and there's no reason for that. So sometimes, you can kind of look over that stuff and really ask yourself if it is truly being helpful or if it's just duplicating what the code pretty literally says. It wasn't well maintained. This is a huge one, right? If you are looking over, there's nothing more frustrating than you read the code comment, you kind of skim the code and then you wait. That's not what that does. And then you're looking between the comment and the code and you're like, wait, I thought that did this, am I wrong? And then you double check, spend more time doing that than it would have just been to read the code without the comment to begin with. And I think part of the problem here is that people don't consider that code comments are part of the code. The comment is in your code. So it is your job to work on it, even if it means deleting it. So if you're working on some piece of, document or code and you're working along and you see a code comment and you just kind of ignore it and work on the code itself and you don't change that comment, you're kind of screwing over the people who came before you. And I think a lot of people who hate comments have seen something like this go on, and that's why. So even if it means that you don't want to write a comment, just delete it, so that you're not maintaining something else from two different places. And I'm gonna go back to this one again. If you're describing the why, you don't actually have to rewrite that comment a lot of times. So if I say something, your comments are of this like kind of better quality to begin with, you express the why and not the how, the problem kind of takes care of itself. If you say, we need to use the flip technique to be more performant in every browser, and I refactor this code later from get bounding client rep to get ebox, the comment still applies. The function exists for the same reason, the details of how are the only thing that changes. So this can actually, this type of writing comments can mean you're maintaining a little bit less also. Quarters, but for code. I mean, we've probably all been here, but it's also like really frustrating if you come to a code base, it's like littered with these kind of things, and you're like, what, why can't you get rid of it? What's happening here? So if you're working along and you're actively working on something, I think these kind of things are totally cool, right? Like you're not sure if you're gonna need it in a minute, you're thinking things through, you're in process, but as soon as you kind of brought that area to a close, I really hope you're all working with version control. If you're working with version control, that thing is still in your code base, kind of. Like you can go into the history, and hopefully you're using good commits, and so you can go back and find that piece of code later. So I would say after you're done, like with that kind of, that section, you've wrapped it up and you're pretty sure that's how it's gonna live, take it out, like just say goodbye and delete. It's okay. We have GitHub, we have GitLab. So the other problem with this is that if you're a maintainer and you're looking at this code, sometimes you do sit there and scratch your head like, why didn't they remove it? Do they know something I don't? Are we gonna need that later? Is that a thing? So don't make them go through that and just kind of say goodbye to that. Another thing that we could do is use a better name. So a lot of times, I've also been guilty of this one, where like I was just like, oh, I'm gonna use these tiny variable names, it's gonna be super cool, because like, it's just gonna be rad. I just like comment what the thing does, and then it's all super tight and awesome. And that's the voice I use in my head when I do that. And that can work because people can read what it does and then scan down the document, but that sucks, right? That means, we all hate typing, but that means that in order to figure out what you were trying to do, I have to go down and up the document to where the comment was and go, kind of try to infer, okay, G was this. So sometimes I can just use a better name, and all of a sudden, yeah, it's a little bit more verbose, but now I know what this code does, right? Now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm generating text geometry. The geometry is gonna get a bounding box. Okay, I'm gonna get these anchors, and I'm gonna get the data, and like you can kind of read that code a lot faster, even though that other one was tighter. Even though the other one was smaller, this one is more legible. I really like this quote from somebody I don't know. Is this person here? I don't even know them, so they could be here. I like the rule in functional programming that if it's hard to name, maybe you're giving the function too much responsibility. Refactoring has helped me name, and likewise, trying to name has also helped me make my functions smaller. I think that that's a really good point, and I think some of the comments that we write are because we haven't named things well. So consider that if you're needing a lot of these kind of comments, reconsider some of your naming decisions. The comments are an excuse for not writing the code better to begin with. Now this is actually the crux of the problem. This is really what Robert C. Martin was talking about, and really what we've kind of talked about in a couple of different places. If you're writing code that's haphazard, leaning back on your comments might be a way for you to clarify. So this means that the comments are actually holding back your programming. This is kind of a horse behind the cart kind of scenario. Unfortunately, even as the author, we're sometimes not sure. We have all sorts of ways of dealing with this stuff in our head. So we lie to ourselves all kinds of ways, right? We might spend the time writing a comment that could be better spent rewriting the code to be a little bit more clear. So we can also tell ourselves that we don't need to comment our code because our code is so well written that everybody will think so, even if they might disagree. So I guess my suggestion is to do your best. Try not to rely on one correct way, and instead write your code and then read it. So envision that you're both the author and the maintainer, and that what would you like to see later? What would your younger self need when reading through that code? So also, it said that 30% of a developer's time is spent writing code, and 70% of our time is spent reading code. I got that stat from Kyle Simpson, Edify on Twitter. So that's a huge difference, right? That means that we actually spend most of our time most time in our life, trying to figure out what code does more than we do writing it. So thinking about that stuff as a last step isn't just kind of optional, it's a really big thing for making sure that we have maintainable code bases and figuring out what works for ourselves in the future. So kind of look at it with fresh eyes. And one way that I do this is that even when I'm working alone, I'll submit PRs to myself, because when I'm looking through the code as an author, I look through it differently when I'm code reviewing. So when I'm looking at the code and understanding what it's doing from the point of view as a maintainer, it really changes, it shifts the way that I think about it. So I encourage that practice too. More than one thing can be true at a time. People tend to get on the side of one side of whether you should write comments or not write comments, but I would argue it's not actually a Boolean. It's that conversation is just not nuanced enough. So why not both? Hopefully this opens to a deeper understanding and consideration when you're thinking about writing comments for your code base and even some other pieces of writing your code. And even so, this can all be a lot to parse. Get it? Parse. Okay. Anyways, I'll leave you with some better humor. A while back, there was a Stack Overflow post about the best comments and that people had written or seen. So there's some pretty fun stuff in there. When I wrote this, only God and I understood what I was doing. I dedicate all this code, all my work, to my wife Darlene, who will now have to support me and our 3 children and dog once it gets released into public. Drunk. Thanks later. Some dev 1. Adding temporary tracking of logging screen 5 years later. Temporary. And the last one that was really funny by Kelly Vaughn is sometimes you need to be your own cheerleader if you can't say it. Says, this is not a useful comment, but you're useful. You can do it. It's true of all of us too. You can do it too. Thank you. I'm not going to take questions because I think it's fun to kind of mill about and speak person to person instead of awkward seating versus presenter. But I'm happy to talk about any of the presentation or just random other stuff. Cool. Thanks for coming.
That's it. Thank you, Sarah Buck, for presenting, and there's beer and people. That you can figure that out. That's all you got.
There's also some pizza left, believe it or not.
All right, there's some pizza left. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
I think it's actually the first time I've done this.